With FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin.
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. I'm familiar with the name. I'm familiar with the name.
Former FBI agent Kyle Seraphin, who recently received a letter from the FBI saying, be quiet about this. Kyle, welcome to the show. You're not following orders.
So, Kyle, you had some issues that brought you here as a whistleblower. Joining me now to discuss is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin. Kyle, thanks for spending some time with us again. Joining me now is FBI whistleblower Kyle Seraphin. Joining me now is a frequent guest of the show, former FBI Special Agent whistleblower as well, Kyle Seraphin.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Right, we're lucky to have him with us today. He's Kyle Seraphin, a real whistleblower himself.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Why did you decide to become a whistleblower?
I just made a decision that this is America's information, it's not mine, and I'm not going to let the FBI steamroll me and my family.
Kyle Seraphin, he's a former FBI agent. He's the host of the Kyle Seraphin podcast, and he joins us on the phone. Hello, Kyle. Great to have you back with us, sir.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Kyle Seraphin.
Let's turn it over to two former FBI special agents turned whistleblowers who are holding the Bureau accountable, Steve Friend and Kyle Seraphin.
A brave FBI whistleblower who is a friend of our show, also Dan Bongino's. Kyle Seraphin. He's the host of something that strangely is called The Kyle Seraphin Show. Follow him on Twitter. I'm Sebastian Gorka. I'll call you later. We'll talk guns. We'll talk optics.
All right. Any update on your whistleblower situation?
No, I expect to be attacked for the foreseeable future.
Okay. At least you're realistic. Thanks so much, Kyle.
All right. Kyle Seraphin, former FBI agent, also host of the Kyle Seraphin podcast. Thanks as always, Kyle. Good to talk to you today, sir.
Perfect, man. God bless you, brother. Thank you for standing up for the truth, man. Thank you for coming on.
Steve, Kyle, you guys are great Americans, and it's an honor to have you on the program. Have a great weekend.
And follow him, Kyle Seraphin, with a PH on Twitter. God bless you, Kyle. This is
Well, so Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. Great chatting with you.
Kyle Seraphin, thank you.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. You can see behind the scenes there. I think I just freaked out Ryan Matta. He did not know that the camera was going to do a hard reboot, and I was going to have to restart my system. Today is Wednesday. It is September the 6th, and you are watching the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live from Liberty Hill, Texas. I've got a guest with me today, a good friend of ours, suspendable George Hill. You will remember George Hill if you have seen the scandal the FBI got involved in by sharing information, or rather Bank of America shared information with the FBI, and he outed that. He came forward. Even though he was a retired guy that didn't need to get involved, he still felt that it was his duty and obligation as an American citizen who wants to live in a free country. So we've got George on. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's been going on in the news today, kind of our take on my metaphor, the overgrown garden. And we'll do a long discussion, I think, on that. And that's going to be probably the meat of what today's show is. Before we get too started and too far away from what what I want to cover, I want to start with a thanks to my friends over at Catholic Vote. So if you all will bear with me here, these are our friends at Catholic Vote, America's top Catholic advocacy organization in the fight for faith, freedom, and family. Great place. Get the email, and here's the loop right here. I've got the loop on my phone. I'm going to open it up right now because I already took a look at it today. We've got a story from the loop that we're going to discuss. George and I will kind of riff on. The number one story is Democrats calling on Democrats to primary Biden. That's not a shock. That should be definitely happening. Democrats confronting Biden over his migration crisis. About time. Welcome to the party. And what we'll be talking about a little bit later, the American Library Association president is a so-called lesbian Marxist, self-proclaimed. And she thinks that libraries should be recruiting zones for leftists and socialist organizing. That sounds wonderful. That's what we really like to hear. In fact, we did talk a little bit about that with Tiffany Justice, if you guys recall our episode with Moms for Liberty. So there is that. The Biden team is denying support to struggling parents. Of course, what would you expect? And a couple of other little pieces on here, like a novena, if you're into praying, if you're a Catholic. Some stuff going on in Loudoun County, which is just outside of the Washington, D.C. little circle. And an analysis, the FBI undercounts the good guys with guns situation, which that is definitely going to be worth your read. I've already read what it's about, and I think you guys will like that article. So check out Catholic Vote by all means. Definitely do that. And if you're doing that, you can also check into our friends over at Patriot Coolers. I don't know what happened to my little bubble here. If you'll bear with me, it looks like our promo code is in the wrong color, but promo code Kyle, go to patriotcoolers.com. Promo code Kyle gets you 10% off. You'll get free shipping over $50, which you can see on the screen right now is one of their hard-sided coolers. These are rotomoted. These are, like I said, very similar to like a Yeti or anything like that, and they are outstanding products. So check into those. We have them at the Seraphin House. I actually have one of their 1-gallon jugs that I'm a big fan of, and we carry it around in the minivan to hydrate the 3 kids who inevitably have either forgotten or lost a water bottle. That's not a surprise to you. Big thanks to our friend Eric Jason in the chat, our moderator, who has hit another Rumble rant saying, smash the like button. Folks, if you have time and you are watching us on Rumble, make sure that Rumble thumbs up is green, showing that you did like the video. Whenever something tickles your fancy, we do appreciate that. All right, without too much further ado, I want to bring on, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend, in many ways. George, I wanted to get into a little funny story about how you and I first connected, because I felt like it's the standard for the way guys like you and I should make contact with each other.
No audio.
Oh, we have no video. Or we no audio from you. Is it there?
From who?
Is it muted?
He's got audio and video on both.
Okay. George, can you hear me?
You're back.
I just can't hear George.
Oh. Kyle? Give me 1 second, Kyle, if you can't hear him. Hold on.
Okay. It says connection problems on my end, whatever that means.
Kyle.
And maybe he can't hear me.
I don't know, Kyle. I can hear both of them, and I got his audio, but give me 1 more second, I guess.
This is the fun of a live show, folks. Bear with us just one moment. We'll get George where we can both hear him.
How about now, Kyle?
I don't know. George, can you hear me? Nope. George can't hear me. There's something on
bummer,
here.
guys.
Do you want to have him dial back in real quick?
Yeah, maybe he could jump out and come back in.
Yeah, if you jump out and come back in, George. The folks in the chat are saying they can hear both of us, but we can't hear each other. So that's going to be a weird talk past conversation. Yeah, George, if you'll bail out of the show and come on back in, we'll get you connected. I'll keep the warm intro that we already did. We'll say how great he was. Before we do any further on that, I want to talk about just kind of the quick things that we're going to discuss today. There's the arrest of Nathan Hughes. Many of you guys may have seen that from the Hodge twins tweeting it out, said it was a friend of theirs, arrested by the FBI.
I forgot he can't hear you. So George, you have to leave. Yeah. I forgot. You were telling him what to do, and he couldn't hear you. So George, Kyle wants you to leave and come back real quick, and then we think, yep, there we go. Okay, gotcha, Kyle.
Fantastic. We're going to talk about some of the new Bud Light of the day, which I think George and I will both have an opinion on as gun owners. And of course, we saw that the leader of the Proud Boys was sentenced yesterday to 22 years in prison, which I think is going to be unsettling for all of us to discuss. It is the nature of government to continue to grow and to continue to overreach. I feel like we've reached sort of that terminal and dangerous point at this juncture in our country. And so this particular episode is known as the Overgrown Garden, but we're talking about a potentially post-constitutional America. George, have you can you hear me?
I can hear you fine now.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've solved the problem. It might have been my hard reboot. So I want to dig into the the quick and dirty of it. You and I, when we first interacted, you found me on Twitter. We didn't know each other while we worked for the FBI. And I felt like the way that you engaged me, because I get a lot of people reaching out and they're like, hey, you know, let's connect. And here's my crazy 15 paragraph blurb about why you should know me. And yours was really tight when you reached out. Do you recall what you said?
I do recall one sentence, which was, you have sources, check me out.
That's right.
Because having been in this business for over 4 decades, I have little time for idle chat. And there are just so many posers out there. I just don't have any time left in my life to deal with them. So, you know, it's kind of like a thing born within developed in the Marine Corps. If you're not early, you're late. You know, don't waste people's time. You know, so yeah, I'm not a touchy-feely guy, and it cuts both ways. Some people appreciate it, other people find it rather off-putting.
The thing that struck me was you basically said, you know, I was in the Boston field office. You have sources, check me out, and then make connection if you want. And I did exactly that. It's like, this is my name. This is how you would source who I am. And so I did. And I reached out to the Boston field office, friends that we have, a mutual friend, and got a quick review on who you were as a person. And that was enough. And then you and I had a phone call, I think in December of last year, because I know I was sitting in a hotel. And And we had never met while we worked in the bureau, but got the immediate vibe of a kindred spirit. Like you said, I had your reputation was no nonsense, a straight shooter, and a very fair individual who just didn't mince words. And I went like, oh, that's the guy I want to talk to. And since then, our friendship I think has grown, and it's been really beneficial to me to have a lot of the experience that you have, and we're going to bring that to the audience today. But if you are out there on Twitter or on social media and you want to reach out to a guy like George Hill, you want to reach out to a guy like me or a Steve Friend or a Garrett O'Boyle, and you want to introduce yourself, if you want to send us like a long cell job, that's pretty much what we do for a living, is read through cell jobs. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's where's your elevator pitch? Here's who I am. Here's why, and you have to come out with the hook, which is, this is why it's beneficial for you to pursue this relationship. If you can't spew that out in 3 or 4 sentences, you're done. But most importantly, it has to be, this is why it's beneficial to you for us to make this connection, because a lot of people reach out and it's about the benefit to them, which I don't know you and I could care less.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's like, why do I care?
Yeah.
So we had a couple of journalists reach out. We had some folks. I have some friendly relationships with the people that were the staff at Project Veritas. We're actually going to show some of their video later on. And some of the staff at Project Veritas had reached out to me and asked me if I would promote a cause of theirs. And I think it's a worthy cause. And the cause is essentially Project Veritas has failed to back the journalists that were raided by the FBI in New York. And they are not supporting them in a legal sense. And so they're kind of on the hook for whatever their legal bills are, and those may be substantial because they're going against the federal government. And so they sent me this video, and the video starts off with, I am this person, and I was nominated by the people at Project Veritas to do this thing, and I have done this thing. And it's like, you lost me. I don't care. I already don't care. And I even like these people. And so the concept that we teach in briefing, and I know that you've probably helped your the people that were students underneath you in the college setting, but also in the professional sense, the bottom line up front, the bluff, the powerful nature of just giving me a reason to listen.
Yeah, if you can't capture that person in 1 or 2 sentences, it's over. The longer you go on trying to make your point, you're just wasting your time. And as time goes by, whether it's in sentences or in seconds, you're pushing that person away.
So one of the things that I've learned from hanging out, talking to you, and like I said, I do benefit from your experience. You've got like a much deeper depth of wisdom. Mine is sort of shallow and very broad, and I have that benefit of working in the private sector. But I've kind of come to the concept that the United States is a lot like a garden. Did you ever, I don't know if you ever read like American literature growing up, and I recall there's this idea, the myth of Edenic possibilities. Do you recall that from like a classical education at all?
Maybe not. I do remember the term, and I keep it alive and refreshed, which is you need to weed your garden from time to time, meaning take people out of your life that are just choking out the sunshine and the nutrients and the water from people who actually enrich your life. Might be along the same vein.
It's the same idea. So the idea is that when the European settlers came over to the New World, to the new continent, there was an untouched sort of pristine land. Let's just we'll just have to ignore the fact that they were indigenous peoples here and doing whatever they were doing. But for the European mindset, they had come into a place that was essentially what they called an Edenic garden. It was a new world. It was a new possibility. Even the name New World implies that they had a new shot at sort of the covenant with God. We talked about idolatry yesterday and kind of got into the things that have gotten in the way, I think, in our society. But the literary reference is the myth of Edenic possibilities, which is to say this fundamental hopefulness. And it's captured all the way through American literature. And I think you'll find that this is like really true when we think about the governmental structure, which is that they said, we have a new shot, a new birth of freedom on this land to be able to bring forth something that has not been done because we are starting with a incredibly wealthy land in resources, in space, in people, in capabilities, and so on. We have ports and we have timber and we have waterways and we have the ability to grow things, and all this kind of stuff was all available to these guys that looked out and saw, basically a vastness out to the west. And the idea of the garden was, if you create a beautiful landscape architecture blueprint to be able to lay out this foundational principle, which was our Constitution, then you can create sort of a perfect place for people to live. And they use the word Edenic in literature because they're talking about the Garden of Eden, literally the first covenant that man and God had together, and sort of the first shot at a perfect existence. And so America, in many ways, for the Europeans and certainly for the founding fathers, represented a opportunity to maybe re-grasp that sort of Edenic capability of living in harmony with God. And we got a really, really good Constitution. We got a really, really good framework to play with. And yet, as is the nature of all things human, we are flawed creatures. I think you would acknowledge that pretty well. And we are also people who are not necessarily always attuned to the things that are the most important to ourselves until it's too late. And so the idea is, in my estimation, the federal government and the mechanisms of the federal government, which were supposed to be very limited and they were supposed to be very narrow in function, have gotten so broad recently because they have been neglected. And my sort of analogy is like ivy, like common ivy. It's also known as English ivy, but it basically grows on the ground. It's a ground cover, and it can take up a lot of space, and it can be beautiful. But if you don't let it, if you don't have something out there keeping the boundaries at bay, then it'll grow up your walls, and it'll get into your foundation, and it'll take out the bricks on the side, and it'll choke out your trees. So that's kind of the analogy I've thought. How do you feel about the creeping nature of government from your different, your 4 decades or so within?
It's changed radically over the course of my lifetime. I'm obviously retired now, so we're talking about, at least as far as being aware of the scope of federal government, we're talking about over 5 decades. It's changed radically in size. It's creeped into every aspect of our lives, but it's not by accident, as you alluded to just a few seconds ago, Kyle. It's actually by design. It's part of the structure of government to continue to grow, to continue to push its way into people's lives. Some of it altruistic, thinking they're doing something good for the country. In most cases, though, it's come to the point where it's all about power and amassing power. I remember Reagan talking about the federal deficit back in the 80s. And now we're up to, I don't know, I'm sure someone will correct me, $23 trillion. At $23 trillion in debt, I should be riding on black silk ribbons of road, and never sitting in traffic. But it's just crept into every aspect of our society, which is what the framers had intended to avoid with the concept of federalism.
I feel like you've had probably a much greater insight into sort of the budgetary process and the way that the federal government sort of grows, at least in the 2 agencies that you've worked for. Can you kind of give people some insight into how that process works, and maybe that it's not the nefarious thing that people think it is, that it's actually sort of like what we call the banality of evil?
I think the best example of that would be, let's just talk about the defense appropriations bill. I worked in the private sector for a few years in between wars, and I worked for a defense company. Which got gobbled up. But you have congressmen and senators that will push for, that we need to have multiple places in the country for these engines to be manufactured, and they treated it as a jobs program. And then they would stand in front of the camera and they would look like a defense hawk pro-America, waving flag back in, behind their head in the background. When in reality, they were just protecting their seat under the guise of protecting their constituency. So you had to have multiple places in the country where the engines for the B-52 bombers were made, multiple places that General Electric used to manufacture fighter engines and engines for helicopters. I'm just using that as an example. But, if you're not expanding in government, you're not doing your job. If you're not, pushing programs out, if you're not building head count, you're failing.
I think that's a really profound thought, and most people would never consider that, because from private industry, if you are not streamlining your business, if you are not trying to get leaner and meaner, and you don't make a profit, the incentive of the government is exactly the opposite from what you just said. And I think that seems to be my experience as well. If you're not expanding, you're failing. Yeah, 100%. So in the analogy of the garden that I like to use, I always talk about the Bill of Rights as being sort of those green landscape boundaries. You've lined out, here's where the lawn is, and here's where the ivy is, and here's where the flower beds are, and you put down those barriers. And those barriers are great, right? And they do a decent job of letting you know where the boundary is. But if you don't come in with a weed whacker and really trim and hedge out those creeping ivies, the government that needs to expand in order to feel like it's successful, if you're not constantly hitting that barrier with a fast spinning string, then you're going to see it grow over, and suddenly your ivy is going to be in your lawn, and your flower bed is going to get choked out by ivy, and suddenly everything is government. And in many ways, I feel like that's where we are right now. The weed whacker is not being used to maintain those boundaries, which are sort of the civil liberties in the first 10 amendments that are supposed to be delineating that line.
But there's no incentive to use the weed whacker. There's actually incentive to not use the weed whacker, which we just covered a few seconds ago. This is why this 2025 plan is important. This is why the next election is so important, because the federal government will continue to metastasize and spread and creep like ivy over everything and choking it out. And what we're seeing now is the ivy choking out people's civil liberties, and people are just starting to notice that how dangerous this spread has become.
And a lot of these people, I think, live in the middle of the lawn. They had no idea that they were near the boundaries, but it's crept so far away from the boundary that it's actually getting into, everyday people, moms who are on Twitter or TikTok, and like a dad who wants to post a video about something and realizes suddenly he crossed the line that he didn't even know existed. Right? He's made some innocent post.
Look, no one is illegal. Everyone's welcome here. Whoa, wait a minute. Not these people, not this many people. They're like, that's a great analogy. They're living in the middle of the lawn. They have no idea that their virtue signaling has some sort of cost to it. And they're just starting to realize it now. The question is that, are people realizing too late, or are there some people that just want to go by the axiom, when you're in too deep, go deeper?
There's that. The other thing I see a lot of is people self-censoring. And I host these Twitter spaces on a regular basis to hear what a couple hundred people may have to say on any given night. And people will constantly say, in case there's any feds listening, I want to say this. And, there's a tremendous fear of the capabilities of the government. Can you talk about a little bit about, one, how founded that is, but also maybe sort of the limitations that exist? Because there are obviously human limitations that people don't understand.
I think I'm going to go with the opposite of that, where most people think it'll go. I think it's more psychological, in that when someone says, I got to be careful what I say because, SecD might be monitoring this podcast. And then they do that either consciously or subconsciously to get the listener to say, ooh, this person's going to say something really profound and dangerous. So I think it's akin to when someone says, and I know Dan Bongino quotes Demi Moore a lot on this one with that movie where she was trying to be a SEAL or something like that. I don't want to make a statement, but I don't want to make a statement, but and the commander says, people who don't want to make statements don't make statements about making statements. So I think it's like that. It's more psychological to kind of draw people in, like, oh, this man or this woman's going to say something really profound. I better listen now. So I don't think we see overtly evidence of self-censorship. I think it's more covertly and underneath our field of vision, where people either withdraw entirely from social media, or, I even have friends when I'm out hiking and we'll get into these rather heated discussions on the trail up in New Hampshire, which is pretty blue. You have a lot of people from the Democratic, Socialist, People's Republic of Massachusetts who hike in New Hampshire. And, my friend will stop talking. I'm like, no, don't stop. Say it out loud. If it offends them, it offends them. There's no penalty to be paid for stifling yourself. In fact, there's a penalty to be paid for stifling yourself.
That's, I think, what I'm getting at is that people are internally censoring their thoughts. Like you say, the people that are most concerned, it's not them saying, well, I don't want to say this because of this. It's that they literally walk out and they go, my wife is one of those people. It's very conscientious people. It's very agreeable people, which you and I probably, we may be one, but not the other. With people who have been around us. I don't think you have a problem saying your mind. And if that hurts someone's feelings, that turns out to be a them problem. I feel very similarly. My wife will be like, oh, don't say that. What if somebody hears you? And it's exactly right. It's like, well, that's a them problem. Why are they eavesdropping on my conversation? If I'm so interesting, it turns out they can turn into my podcast and hear exactly what I think if they want to hear more. And if they don't ever have to hear me again, because I'm about to walk past them, because I walk really quickly and I don't have time for slow, dobbling around on the sidewalk. And if you happen to be listening and eavesdropping and that offends you, that's a you problem. It turns out you have no right not to be offended in this country.
Right. I mean, I try to police my language as a 26-year veteran, 13 of which were active duty Marine Corps. My language can be rather colorful. Mm-hmm. If I'm out in public, I try to be mindful that there are people with children or other people that may be turned off by colorful language. But the content of my speech, like you said, Kyle, if they have a problem with it, that's their problem. That's not my problem. And I'm not going to censor myself for fear of, tweaking someone. As of today, there is no legal penalty for saying something coming out of a CVS that someone coming into the CVS might find offensive.
Except maybe in Michigan, it looks like they may have criminalized that in some way. There's some strange laws. I don't know how they hold up against our First Amendment, but my instinct is the weed whacker, at least the primary weed whacker that we should be using, is our protected First Amendment speech. You don't have a right to be unoffended. And that includes people speaking ways that you don't like either. That should go both ways. I get into these on Twitter all the time where people are blocking, oh, I blocked this guy, and they feel really proud of it. It's like, no, I listen to this guy. In fact, if I find them very offensive, and it's not because of something they're saying that is, gross or just profane, if it's something that I just find very repulsive as an idea, I oftentimes follow them because I want to know. I just followed a guy named William Legate, who is like David Hogg's buddy. I actually follow David Hogg too.
I do too, yeah.
And it's like, I want to know what people who I don't agree with say, because I need to know what terminology is being used and I need to know how radical they're being. And I do it, and I'll engage with them in good faith. And if I find out that they cannot be, if I can't handle that, that's a me problem. It turns out that my inability to listen to them it's really on me.
No, I agree 100%. And, I love following people that I disagree with, which is one of the reasons I'm more active on Twitter than I am on Truth Social. Truth Social tends to be somewhat of an echo chamber. I applaud President Trump and Devin Nunes for developing that platform. It's a friendly place, but I live in deep blue Massachusetts. I find it helpful to listen to, these people and what their stance is. I live surrounded by people with BLM signs and hate has no home here signs. I love seeing these people and listening to them because it helps me, it enriches my own perspective.
Right. And clearly they're not all bad people. That's, I think, the most important thing that I mentioned yesterday. And for folks that didn't listen to it, we kind of went on this rant about if you think that you're the end all be all, then you are also idolatrizing, or you're idolatizing. How do you say that word? Idolatrizing?
Idolizing?
Idolizing. Thank you. I added an extra syllable for no reason. If you're idolizing yourself because you think that you're the font of the only capability of truth, then you are also failing. Like, we should all be capable of reflection. And so anyway, I love to have it. Like you say, it enriches. I think that's the right word for it. I've got a couple of videos. These are some of the things that are happening right now. We talked about the growth of the administrative state, the way that the government continues to, by its own necessity, by the way it's designed, creep. And we are now seeing this sort of really bizarre sort of turn where people are being arrested for misdemeanors in this country. We just saw Enrico Tarrio sentenced to 22 years. I want to talk about that a little bit too, because I know you have a lot of experience in the counterterrorism space, and we can kind of just I think if you don't work in that world, 22 years sounds like a punishment that people might get in some reasonable setting. But, I've seen guys who were involved in creating child pornography get 10 years, and that being a rough sentence, like a really rough sentence. I've seen guys distributing child pornography on the dark web, get 40 months, of which they served half of it, kind of deal. And so the idea that someone who wasn't physically at an event, that he conducted insurrection by remote using not his phone. I don't even know what he was supposed to have been using. I think they even took his devices. I think he was in custody at the time.
It was mental.
Yeah, he was using the mental botnet to reach out to the satellites and communicate with his buddies through the unspoken conspiracy. Anyway, the absurdity of that kind of goes to the point where I'm going to show you a couple of videos right now. Do we have the arrest videos, number 4, capable, Ryan?
Yes, sir.
Let's send that. This came out from the Hodge twins. This is a guy named Nathan Hughes. He's in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He is just a guy that was arrested for the FBI. I'm going to talk about the circumstances of it and what the concrete allegations are in the fact patterns the DOJ put out. And we're also going to talk about I guess Liberty Safes wants to be the next Bud Light because of this. So let's roll video number 4 if you could. I know there's 2 parts to it, so we'll talk over if we have to.
You want part 1, Kyle, with the cars, or part 1 outside the store?
Let's roll the cars first, and you can do it without sound because George and I will actually comment on it, I think.
Roger.
So, folks, what you're seeing is camera from the surveillance at the Hughes residence, and we are showing now a classic FBI arrest warrant, search warrant package coming in. You see a Suburban. There's a Buick. That's probably some kind of I don't know who's getting the Buick, but in my office it was always an SAC or an ASAC. Yeah. Then we've got a bunch of people coming in standard government cars. You got your Chevys and your Dodges. You've got another SUV rolling in. There's another sedan. These are all darked out, so pretty standard. You've got another sedan here. This looks like a Ford. So that was probably like 6 cars, maybe 7 cars.
7 cars.
And that's pretty classic. Figure at least double occupancy. Then it skips forward about 10 or 12 minutes. This is probably the search package coming in. And so we just saw another 2 cars roll in from the other side of the highway. There's another one dropping in there as well. So you've probably got upwards of 20 people on scene. I'm wondering, George, did they have you on scene at all with any of the searches, or were you kind of back command post status?
George just cut out, Kyle. He just came right back in, so he didn't
George,
hear that question.
when you were working in Boston, did you go on scene for any of the searches, for any of the subjects you guys were involved in, or were you mostly command post?
No, I did both. I'd say probably 2/3 command post, but a couple times on scene because some of the people on my squad were on ER. To observe firsthand, their performance and interaction with the rest of the members of the team and agents on site. But that's SOP. That's how they roll these days. That I only joined the Bureau in 2010, and that was how they rolled then. I don't know how they rolled, pre 9/11. I'm sure it wasn't that heavy. And also from a tactical standpoint, if you need that many men and women with guns and you come down a fatal funnel like that, you're all going to get smoked. So to me, it's just a show of force.
So I used to describe it as law enforcement cosplay. That's pretty much my standard ever since I went to the FBI Academy. I didn't have any other law enforcement to ping it against other than my interactions with local police. And what I would say is what the state police will do with one trooper on the side of the road, or most police officers will do with a partner on a knock and talk, the FBI will do with like a 10 to 20 man team, and they won't even blink an eye at it. Is that pretty much the same experience in all the field offices as far as you know?
Absolutely. That's SOP, which is, again, why I went and down to Quantico 6 years ago now, I think, to be a field counselor.
I think it's 7 because I was there. 7.5.
Yeah. And I wanted to see how is this even happening? How is this even possible? And I saw firsthand how it's happening and how it's possible. That's how we train them.
You want to give any insight into watching? I'm assuming you got to see some of the tactical training that happened in Hogan's Alley and the way that they teach people to enter and compare that maybe with your military experience overseas and how that maybe combines with it, or how it's just doesn't make any sense based on the mission set.
What struck me as odd about Hogan's Alley is that the way they gained entry, there didn't seem to be an overarching concern with safety of the individuals who may be in the house. I know that on my deployments, if we entered a house, the primary concern was the safety of, and I deploy with Marines and ODA Bubbas, but the primary concern was the men. There were no women on the trigger, and here we're talking about American citizens. And I saw the same, not identically, but a very similar mindset to what I saw in. I was only in Afghanistan. I didn't go to Iraq. I understand. I never really involved in any kind of the urban activities there, but it didn't look unfamiliar in terms of tactics. How the FBI works the students at Hogan's Alley.
Just didn't seem to care about the safety of those inside because I guess they're lesser than if they have a search warrant served there. We'll do kind of a tactics evaluation here. We rolled the second video from the Hodge Twins Twitter feed real quick, Ryan. You can do it without sound, and we'll kind of talk through it.
I think there's a mindset of you brought this on yourself. You did this to yourself, which gives you license.
I think that's exactly right. So, folks, if you're not watching on the Rumble channel, what we're seeing here is a very nice, looks like Jeep Wrangler Unlimited, or maybe it's a Humvee. And it is an individual wearing camouflage shorts that are above the knee. So he's wearing kind of like the bro shorts. He's got a white t-shirt on. He has nothing in a waistband that we can see from the video. He's got his hands extended above his head with a baseball hat on, and he's got them far away. He's got like kind of that classic military watch. We're seeing it through a door. And this is on the sidewalk of like maybe a commercial building. Looks like maybe outside of like a Home Depot type shopping center or something. There's some pallets in the way. And they're showing just the guy following commands. He's pointing, he's speaking, he's engaging. And we're about to see the FBI package that's going to take this guy into custody. 1, 2, 3. And here comes the fourth female coming in from the rear. Everybody slung a rifle at low ready. I have no idea why. A fifth guy coming in an L shape. And also everyone kind of walking with just this lackadaisical attitude. Does that make any sense to you in a tactical environment? Or why in the hell would you bring... Like, I just don't understand the rifles there, George. Is there anything you can justify this sort of weirdness?
They did manage to execute a circular firing
squad
there towards the end.
I've got George showing connection problems on my side.
I don't know how that would have went down.
There he is.
Started
and now your audio's down.
Circular.
So
we can all hear him, Kyle. So we can hear him.
You're not hearing
you
Kyle
just can't,
now?
Kyle.
Now I can. Go ahead.
Okay. But no, this is just a show of force, and there's no evidence of sound tactical procedure here. This is all for show. There's really I can't think of anything more to comment beyond that. This is like you said, it's cosplay. I don't understand. I don't know what the hell Director Wray is talking about, that this gives the average American confidence in their law enforcement to see this kind of overwhelming use of force here, and thank God that woman in the back, I think it's a woman, her rifle was at the low ready.
Right. I just don't, she's not in a firing position, as you can articulate. Like the danger there of having someone, I used to always say this, and our producer emeritus, Phil, and I used to always talk about this, and it was one of my first statements to him. I got out on the special operations team, which is the surveillance group, which we can talk about real quickly about whether that is an elite organization or not. I had one of my bosses get mad because I said it wasn't. But my general perspective after leaving the FBI Academy was that if I see an FBI agent draw a weapon, that person is the most dangerous person in the room to me, bar none. Is that something you could agree with? Is that something that would offend you?
So I carried what was referred to as a cinch blade because under the Clinton administration, I was not allowed to carry a concealed weapon into a federal building, even though I'm licensed in Massachusetts and a host of other states. Mm-hmm. And I'm a certified firearms instructor. So I carried a cinch blade in the same place that I would carry appendix carry. I carry appendix carry. I have a 32-inch waistline, so I can do that. And I had an agent ask me one time in an elevator, how come you carry a cinch blade? And I said, because I can't carry a firearm. He goes, do you think that's going to defend you against a firearm? I said, I can get this out and into operation before you can get your weapon out. And that ended the conversation. I had to go through 8 hours of psychological testing, followed by an interview with a psychiatrist, followed by a full lifestyle polygraph exam, all in one day. It was like almost a 14-hour day to join the National Security Agency. I was mortified when I found out that the FBI didn't have to go through anything similar, yet we give guns and badges out to these people.
Yeah, a lot of them have no business carrying a weapon. I remember they actually, I something had maybe like a 2.5 hour poly or something to that effect. And when I sat down in the chair, they asked all these questions, and then I answered them all truthfully, including some funny stuff where they were like, have you ever, committed a crime and gotten away with it? And I'm like, yeah, I when I was in college, I used to break into buildings and find vacant buildings and try to creep into them and stuff. And the guy's like, so what is that, like a misdemeanor trespassing? And I was like, I don't know what the charge was. I just knew it was wrong and I did it. You asked me if I committed crimes and I didn't get caught. And he got kind of pissed at me. And he's like, did you ever rob a bank and get away with it? I was like, no. He's like, you ever murder somebody and like nobody found out? I'm like, no. He's like, you ever do a hit and run and somebody died? And it's like, no, I didn't do any of those. He's like, that's what I'm talking about. And I'm like, well, that's not what you asked. I just answered the question as it was written. So I did that. And then at the end of it, we go through the whole thing. And I think they actually had me come back and do an extra hour. And the guy goes, well, you probably just had some like minor academic cheating or something that wasn't a big deal. Because they're trying to still get you to lie and say that you've said something false while you're on the poly machine. And I remember really specifically being very incensed. And this is the kind of people that you expect to work in a national security setting.
Yeah.
I was so incensed when the guy asked me if I had cheated. I decided to justify it for him. And this is a little bit of an overshare for my audience, but I think they'll appreciate it. I go, not only have I never cheated on anything academically in my life, and I am incensed the fact that you said it, I actually earned every single bit of a 0.75 GPA for one semester at college, because when I went into a test and I didn't even know that the class was having a midterm that day, I still wouldn't look at anybody else's answers because I thought I was smarter than they were. And my guesses were going to be as good as anybody else's. It turned out that I actually passed the midterm. I just skipped the final on accident, so I ended up getting a D in the class. It doesn't work out real well, but I got a terrible GPA all on my own because I actually believe in my own work. And it's like maybe it's arrogance, maybe it's hubris, maybe it's just the fact that I thought it was wrong to go and try to pull somebody else's answers, and that would have weighed on me forever. I just couldn't have done it. So anyway, they try to catch you with this, but that's the closest I ever got to a real invasive look into what kind of person I was. And other than that, they went and pulled my medical records and they talked to the psychologist I spoke to in the Air Force when I separated, and that was it. I mean, there was nothing there. So it's not a lot of big looks. And then you get these people that carry a gun that have never carried one before.
No, I mean, it's all across America, the lowering of standards. I was in the gym yesterday and speaking to a guy who used to be a trainer teaching people how to fly helicopters. And anyone who is a pilot knows that you have to learn how to fly fixed wing before you can learn how to fly helicopters.
Sure.
And he got out of it because they were eliminating blocks of training that he felt it was important. They were doing some of the training online. So this is just across the board in almost every aspect of our society, a lowering of standards.
It's everywhere. And you talk about lowering of standards. Let's kind of talk about the unequal application of standards, if we can. We've seen what's been going on to J6 guys. I think a lot of people are so saturated with what's happened since 2020. I want to jump back to 2017. I've got a couple videos, video 5, 6, and 7, Ryan. You can play them. They don't need audio, but it might not hurt to hear some of the crowd noises. Let's play video 5. This is coming from James O'Keefe's Twitter feed. This goes back 5 years now, almost 6 years maybe. And let's just play a little bit of what was happening with the Disrupt J20 movement. And we'll talk about that in just a second, but let's throw the video up. And maybe if you can play video 7 back to back, and we'll talk about it in just a second, what these both are, and we'll give the context with video 6.
Hey, you see Mela? Alicia, come on. You got milk?
I got Mela.
Thank you.
I've been through this.
Thank you. Just this one.
probably enough to see what we're talking about here. So that was obviously January 6th of 2021, the insurrection and the attack of the Capitol. Or not, that was actually Donald Trump's inauguration, which is where a bunch of lefty loonies tried to take over the U.S. Capitol, the entire area. They were on the north side of the parade route, burning vehicles. There's great pictures. You guys can go back and look if you want to type in disrupt, the letter J and the number 20 on your social media feeds with a hashtag on there, hashtag disruptJ20. You'll find, in fact, that they burned the Secret Service director's vehicle and his motorcade and some other things going on there. There was an awful lot of like violent activity. I actually made a felony arrest on that day of a guy who was attacked in the U.S. Park Police helicopter, which I tweeted out today. All of them were let go. Do you remember Disrupt J20 as a concept that was being floated in Boston at the time?
Oh, absolutely. No, we had we had weekly geez Louise,
CTD conference calls
meetings. JTTF meetings. So we would have our partners in with us to include members of the U.S. Attorney's Office. And a lot of that street level intelligence came up from BPD, the Boston Police Department. So, yeah, no, we were very well aware of these this desire to raise hell on Inauguration Day.
And of course they did. They were doing the same thing. Their whole goal was to disrupt the inauguration so that it couldn't happen. That was what they were actually their stated goal. If you'll do video number 6, I think we've got some audio. This is undercover audio captured by the OG stuff that was going on at Project Veritas during the Trump administration. If you want to play 6 for me, Ryan.
Our journalist also infiltrated several groups operating under the main umbrella of Disrupt J20, like the Industrial Workers of the World, a quasi-socialist group, the Metropolitan Anarchist Coordinating Council, and Refuse Fascism.
Our goal is to continue to help shut down the city and make inauguration a giant clusterfuck that day. So be prepared to help make the inauguration a giant clusterfuck. So we're not going to publicly announce the route, but we are planning a route that will help us jam up the works of this day. Lots of marching against traffic on one-way streets, stuff like that.
So we're talking about a group of people that were hoping they could disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, which is what we've heard was going on. And then they actually showed up and did the thing, as opposed to what we heard about on January 6th of 2021, which was that a bunch of people showed up. Some people acted like morons. What did you say? Stupid people acting stupidly, George?
Yeah,
Is that your...
exactly. I said that in congressional testimony. They said, what would you call it? And I said, yeah, I would call it stupid people doing stupid SHIT.
100%. So the differential is that the amount of prosecutions that were run. Do you remember a big task force set up in Boston or any of the other Northeast states running down the people that were trying to disrupt J20?
Oh, you mean in 2017? No, absolutely not. No.
Why was that? How come Trump didn't use this weaponized DOJ that he had to go after everybody?
Because at that time, and I think it's a reasonable approach, between BPD and the state police and other local law enforcement, we felt that we had enough sources already embedded in some of these groups that we could simply disrupt anything before it occurred. There wasn't any effort for any kind of massive roundup or, getting FISA set up on American citizens on their social media accounts. There wasn't any of that. And now in hindsight, I don't think it was because the FBI and the DOJ were more temperate then. I think that the mindset was more from a leadership standpoint, those few bad apples that I keep on hearing about, that it's these are our peeps.
Isn't that something that they sort of ideologically aligned with them? I certainly saw that in Portland when I went out there. And I don't know how close you got to the folks that were running the show out there, or if you sent any of your intel people to go and do the, what are they calling it? The TDY rotations there?
No, but I do have a friend of mine who shall remain nameless, who actually still works in the Portland office. And actually the former ASAC for CT, who I worked with very closely during the scenario trial and other satellite trials of his
did we lose George?
Buddy list.
Or can you guys hear him?
Went on to be the SAC out there.
Okay.
Who'd you lose?
There you go. I got you back.
Kyle lost you. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're having some connection difficulties. I'm gonna have to upgrade your your digital fiber line that runs into your home, so I can upstream some of your thoughts more.
Well, I mean, CTD is mostly focused on you. Not CTD. Well, maybe CTD.
On me, on white supremacists, the so-called white supremacists.
Now that they've had to, jump in, with me, it's straining their bandwidth, which is disrupting our activities.
That's it. They're pulling all of it out of there. It's sad when we think that like is it's mostly a joke. But like I said, I went and bought a gun the other day at the store, and when I told the lady, go ahead and just email it so the FBI knows what I'm buying, I don't need to hide it. I don't need a paper trail. We might as well make it digital for them. And she laughed, and I was like, that's not me being funny. That's me being serious. There's almost no doubt in my mind that there's a counterintelligence investigation with me. I've already spoken to somebody in Russia, so that's enough. You want to, can we broadly talk about that? I know that that CRA has actually published out what is essentially the gist, and I don't know how they got it, but the gist of Appendix G within the dialogue. So it's publicly available now for people to see it, and I'll tweet it out later today if you're not following my Twitter feed. But just how easy it is to open up an intel investigation to someone, what that predicate burden looks like.
Being able to fog a mirror. I mean, it really is that low.
Yeah.
I mean, being an intelligence supervisor, for example, an intelligence analyst cannot cite any work done by not the ADL. Who's the other one? The
SPLC.
SPLC, exactly. So, I'll see an Intel product and I'll take a look at it, and I have to put my college professor hat on then and go and start doing, searches for what would, if it were a college paper, looking for plagiarism. And if I can find something from the SPLC, I'll kick it back and but the truth of the matter is that just because they're not allowed to use public, information coming from the SPLC or other left-wing organizations, you almost can't stop their mind from embracing that. And I could stop them from using that as an actual source. The fact is that they meaning the analyst and to some extent the agents, although my optic is not as good on them as it is on the analysts, they embrace that ideology, and if they can't use it overtly, they'll use it covertly.
Yeah, most certainly. So I think what you're getting at is that these people go read something from SPLC, they will internalize what that dialogue is. And then,
that's the word.
And then they'll go parallel source it through someone else using slightly different words, and it'll be a slightly more acceptable source of information, whether it be a college paper or something else, or some professor wrote something or a speech, and then they can go and they can basically launder that position from SPLC or even the Anti-Defamation League or whatever it may be, some leftist source, and they'll launder it into an Intel product by finding somebody else that said it in a slightly less extreme way or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I did my briefings at NSA, it was in a Five Eye forum there with the director of NSA, and occasionally he would ask a question that was not suitable for the Five Eye community, and I would just go out and find another source somewhere that I could brief. It's not that hard. You can do it in almost any aspect of your life, whether it's academia or in federal law enforcement.
Yeah, we used to always call that talking around the classified material. If you can go find it open source, you're referencing something that has been published and makes a supposition or makes some analysis, or maybe it was leaked, who knows. But the fact is you can source it to something other than your classified knowledge, and you go, here's some information. Hence my point on CRA. The Center for Renewing America has basically said that you can open an intelligence investigation to someone who is either the target of a foreign intel service or who is actively working for them. But the target part is the part where it's like, that doesn't mean that they agreed to it. That's the thing that's so scary for most people. You talk about fogging a mirror. If somebody has the possibility of being interesting, and you and I are clearly interesting to a foreign intel service, then that's an easy open. It's 100% like, well, they might be. Literally, it doesn't have to have the burden that they are or that anyone's ever even discussed it. The fact that I got an email on Twitter from somebody, or a DM on Twitter from somebody in Iran, who works for their state-funded media, that's enough. That would be plenty to predicate.
It's an easier argument to make than a direct message from someone to Kyle Seraphin saying you should talk to me. It really is that simple, the ability to fog a mirror. It's sad, but I mean, and you and Steve Friend and others have talked about this at length since I've known you, that the whole intelligence apparatus, there are no barriers to collection. It's a giant Roomba running around 24/7, hoovering up all manner of information, and then it's incentivized as to how many of those you can actually turn into a full field investigation. But it's a giant Roomba that just roams the country, hoovering up everything it can. And then some intelligence analyst, with pink hair, with a degree in international studies from George Washington University, is going to turn it into an intel product, and we're off to the races.
I know
it really
she,
is
her.
that simple.
I know. I worked with she, her.
I'm sorry?
I said I worked with she, her. I know who that is. Yeah, those intel analysts you're speaking of. The crazy thing is that's the way that the Chinese intelligence apparatus was described to me when I started working Chinese CI. Exactly that way. A giant vacuum cleaner that sucks up all the possible information and then it goes and sorts it out when they have time and bandwidth. And we're doing the same.
Yeah. Since you mentioned, just real brief, maybe not part of this podcast, but it's important for your audience to know. The Chinese do suck up everything, but they have better supercomputing capabilities. And since they have all the SF-86s, all the hotel data, all the medical records of everybody who has a clearance, their computers actually just sort through that and deliver targeting packages to a case agent every day. So the Chinese are doing the same thing, but in a far more sophisticated and targeted fashion.
I'm going to restate what you just said. The OPM hack that happened after I was hired, so my information is part of that, and I know yours is as well. The SF-86 is every place you've ever lived, all the known acquaintances in those areas, the full security package that we put together in order to get a clearance, whether secret or top secret. And you fill these things out with all of your, access to medical records and so on. They put together this big package. This is the vetting that we were talking about earlier. This is the paper vetting, at least. The Chinese managed to hack the Office of Personnel Management in 2016 or 17? We just lost George. They grabbed all this. There's the Chinese for you. They grabbed all this stuff and they managed to get it all sorted out. And we were all basically given a 3-year subscription to LifeLock as sort of the sorry that we screwed up your world and sorry that we gave access to all this Chinese information. They took it all. They were able to, like you said, break it down in a supercomputer, and they can do targeting packages that are very specific, whereas the U.S. is still sort of like trying to grab all this information. They don't have that on every American citizen, although I imagine they probably have access to all the DoD records if they wanted, which is a lot of us.
Yeah, I'm concerned about that. I mean, the FBI is developing the capability. CISA certainly has the capability, and then they're partnering with Silicon Valley, who absolutely has the capability. So when we talk about, the 2024 election and some of the concerns we have, if big DOJ and FBI and DHS and HSI need to do selective targeting, the capability is still there. It may not be as sophisticated and as well used as the Chinese, but rest assured that if somebody in a conference room deems you as a legitimate threat that needs to be removed, even if it's just temporarily, let's just lock you in the D.C. federal detention facility for a couple of years without any pretrial hearing, and let's just get this election over with.
Yeah, and that's something. I want to, we talked about some of the sophisticated methods of gathering intelligence. Let's talk about something really base level. Ryan, if you'll pull up, let me see what topic that was. Topic number 3 for me, specifically just the screenshot from Liberty Safes. I know as a gun owner, this is a concern for you, so I'm just going to read this right off. This is the statement made by Liberty Safe, who is the manufacturer of the safe that this guy Nathan Hughes had at his house. We just saw his arrest. And this is what they said. On August 30th, 2023, Liberty Safe was contacted by the FBI requesting the access code to the safe of an individual for whom they had a warrant to search their property. Our company policy, this scares the hell out of me, by the way, our company policy and protocol is to provide access to law enforcement if a warrant grants them access to a property. After receiving the request, we receive proof of the valid warrant, and then only then did we provide them with an access code. Liberty Safe had no knowledge of any of the details surrounding the investigation at the time. And then it goes on with this BS statement about how they're interested in protecting personal property and Second Amendment rights, and has repeatedly denied a request for access codes without a warrant. And they don't give out their compensations without proper legal documentation provided by authorities. This, to me, George, is a lot like what you were dealing with. Warrant or no, I've never heard of seeking out an access code, and I've never heard of a private company saying, yeah, you can have this. The fact that they retain it scares the living hell out of me. I have no idea why that would be the case. Have you ever thought that that companies would give up like codes to your personal safe?
No, and you know what strikes
There it
me
is.
even more so is concerning? That some agent, probably an agent, some GS 13 or 12, said, you know what? Maybe I'll just ask them for it, and they'll just give it to me. You know, that's why, you know, when I raised the Bank of America issue, I think it was so important, is that there are no boundaries. You know, going back to your original Ivy intrusion analysis and you know, there are no boundaries to anything. So yeah, I'll just ask them for the codes and they'll give them to me. So yeah, it's not Bank of America. It's not on a grand scale. It's not January 6th, but it's the same mindset of people thinking that they're doing their patriotic duty and, quote, defending democracy. Well, if you're ignorant and you don't know the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and you don't understand that we actually live in a constitutional republic, then they probably actually believe that they are doing their patriotic duty. It pains me to say that out loud.
The irony that they're called liberty safes and decided to cooperate with the government on anything. I've been on search warrants where they were safes and the option was always the same. It's like, you can give us the code or we're going to crack the safe. Either way, we're getting into this. And there are easy ways to get into it, which I'm about to show some people because I think it's relevant for gun owners to know and for people that want to protect their valuable property. Your residential safety container is only as safe as basically your access to the property. You want to go ahead?
One more point. Going back to what when you showed that video from the Hodge twins on that takedown, and my analysis regarding Hogan's Alley and the FBI Academy, the reason they want to get access to the safe is for the safety of the agent. And I said that was paramount, and I saw that in evidence in the training. That's why they want to do this. This is not about executing a safe arrest warrant with no loss of life and minimal damage. This is about protecting the safety of the agent.
You think it's because they want to make sure that there are no guns that are even secured guns on the property? That's what it's about?
I know that's what it's about because
I couldn't figure it out I couldn't figure it out. Like, what in the hell they need to get in there for a misdemeanor charge where he threw his elbow in the direction of a shield of a police officer is what they allege.
Right. Yeah, we did this for our takedowns. You know, does that person have a gun license? Has there been any firearms charges related to this person? Is there anybody in his family that has a gun license? This is all part of FBI agent safety. Now, we can have that discussion of what the level of safety should be. I come down because I have put my life at risk multiple times, obviously not in a law enforcement role, but it comes down to a mitigated risk. And what they're saying is that we're going to eliminate persons' constitutional protections in favor of 100% agent safety.
Which is horrific. I think I want to do an entire show on that with you and Steve and Garrett, and maybe we'll get some other cops from the local level about the risk they're willing to assume and the presence of firearms. I think the federal government in general trains agents to be looking at firearms as like, in the same way they do serial numbers. My buddy Steve Stambolia, who we call the machine gun lawyer, and he's going to come back on. He's made arguments in court that the reason that the government thinks that there should be a serial number is for tracking in the case of a gun crime. But that presupposes that every gun will be used in a crime. And he's made a successful argument right now in front of the Dallas District Court, I think the Eastern or the Northern District of Texas, and stating that this is a false assumption. That a very, very small fraction of 1% of guns, like it's like 0.1% of guns are actually used in crimes, and to make every single one of them presupposed against the odds that they will be used in a crime is sort of indicative of the government's position, which is that guns are dangerous, okay, and they're bad, okay, and they rather side with a David Hogg than what the actual Constitution says, which is why these boundaries that we have, these green barriers in the garden, are so important. You have to have them. But I think it starts with speech. I'd rather it not get to a Second Amendment situation, but the government needs to respect it as well, and it doesn't.
No, and one more thing. You talked about the serial numbers. Ghost guns. The number of ghost guns involved.
Can you put that in air quotes for me? I can't take it.
Immeasurable.
Yeah, it's
immeasurable.
It's not a serious thing. For anyone who's manufactured a gun, I could walk over to my safe right now and pull one out that I've made myself. And I would never carry it. I would never carry the so-called ghost gun over a commercially manufactured firearm because the tolerances are not right. And so it's fun to shoot. It's a cool project. It's a neat hobby gun. There's nothing wrong with having it. There's American tradition behind it. But the idea that you would carry like a milled lower receiver on a handgun that you milled is that's a crazy person that wants to do that. If that's what your only method of protection is, because I guarantee you my Glock and my SIG are going to be a lot more reliable, and they've been proven. I've proven that thing is not, it doesn't always fire right. Not the way I want it to.
One of my analysts wrote a paper, intelligence bulletin on ghost guns. As much as I didn't want to, let it go forward, but I got at least got the language changed to the point, or tightened it up, that in terms of crimes and even suicides, the number of occurrences is almost immeasurable. It's like a half a dozen places to the right of the decimal point.
Right. It's a boogeyman in the same way the AR-15 is a boogeyman when you talk about the number of deaths in this country. All right. We talked about the residential safety containers. Most safes that you guys are having, these Liberty safes and others, these quote unquote gun safes, the word safe is actually not, it actually is a legal term. These things are legally referred to as residential safety containers. I'm going to show you a couple of videos right now. I want you to understand why it is an illusion, why it is so easy for law enforcement to enter, and why you don't need to go and have the company like Liberty break their trust with you. We've got, let's do video number 1. I'm saying Liberty Safe is the new Bud Light because they've named themselves something that is supposed to be for Americans and patriots who want to protect their liberties, and yet they're going to roll over for the FBI. This is how easy it is to get into one of these safes if somebody is so serious and has control of the situation the way a law enforcement entity does. Video 1, if you'll roll it, Ryan. I can't remember if we're running this with or without audio, but
we've come to Liberty Safe to give you some information on what
with
to
audio.
look for when you're buying
Sounds
an
good.
entry-level safe. We're here with Jamie Skousen from Liberty Safe. Jamie, tell me about it.
Well,
all right, let's skip forward a little bit until they start doing the pry bar attacks, if you can.
Okay. They're between $500 and $600.
Okay.
What we
Copy.
wanted to
Give me
do
1
today
second.
is to put them to the test on a pry test to see how strong they are.
In a pry test, that makes sense because
Okay, so this is the pry test. They give these guys 5 minutes to pry it open. It's 2 men with pry bars. We probably don't even need the audio. But they managed to crack the first set of
12
bolts.
seconds. They got
At 12
part of it
seconds.
open already.
So you're seeing this pop open. Basically, these guys have 2-man pry bar. One guy opens up the space. The other guy gets into the door. These are actually easier if they're bolted to the ground. It's harder the way they're doing it because they don't have a stable base to brace against. But you can pop these things open with pry bars in under 30 seconds. You'll see these guys do it in about 39 seconds. This is a stack on from the look of it. I had one just like it. They're very heavy. They're hundreds of pounds. Most of that weight is actually going to be in commercial drywall, which is a fire retardant. That's why they have them in there. It's very, very thin steel in the realm of like 18, maybe 14 gauge at the highest. They pop that open in 39 seconds if you're watching the video. So you can see 2 guys with crowbars on a non-secured surface. We'll kind of watch forward. Once again, these things are all in the $400 to $600 range. You can buy these at any kind of a sporting goods store. The Liberty Hill one, or the Liberty Safe, is a little bit longer on their attack because it's got better bars. But that assumes a frontal attack that you're going to go in and try and pry the doors open. So you'll show this one. They'll pop this thing open in like 10 or 12 seconds, I think. It's just a matter of getting your attack done. So this is your smash and grab job. This is keeping honest people honest when we talk about the way a safe would work. And if you guys have never seen this done before and you have some illusion that this heavy safe that you've been moving around, or one of your buddies has a safe, there you go, 21 seconds, popped right open. That one looks just like, they all look the same. They're all like stack on style. Let's do video number 2, because video number 2, and I think we have to start a little bit late in the video. It's at 9:35, Ryan, if you'll do it. This is a video that is shown of a Liberty Safe actually cracking open. We can run a couple of minutes on the pry bar here, but it's just the same thing. It's just dudes, doing a pry bar attack on slightly better bars. Let's switch over to video number 2.
And
if you would.
they said they didn't get into the Liberty Safe. They had 2 minutes here on this one, and they couldn't get into it. And
Correct.
I got the next video ready.
Yeah, let's do the next video. So folks, you can see Liberty Safe is supposed to be slightly better on a pry attack, which means they're going through the door, but here's how you actually get into one of these things. Do video number 2 for me. I don't think we need sound either.
Give me 1 second. I just got to kill the sound. We'll be playing it.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so this one is not a Liberty. This is actually going to be a Winchester safe. They're pretty much the same idea. And this is a company that I've actually bought safes from. I have no money invested in them. They don't pay us anything. But this is a guy who works for a company called Secure It. And his point is you can spend these hundreds of dollars on these fancy, extremely heavy. I've actually moved one down into my basement one time in Virginia, George, and one of my buddies almost lost his thumb, pounding against the wall. He was a Marine, so I think he would have been okay. But we had this thing kind of get away from us going down the stairs. And you're noticing this guy's basically just got a basic corded circular saw and a carbide bit. and he's about to just throw this thing off, and you're seeing it in real time. Like in the time that I've started speaking to you, he's able to cut the top off these things because the steel is such thin gauge. There's almost nothing there, and it's really, really quite easy of it. Other than he's getting a face load of dust coming out of the drywall, but you're going to see him pop this thing open like a soda pop can, and here it is. Just man strength alone is able to pull that thing open. That should kind of unsettle you, and it should tell you that the idea that the safe company needs to comply with the FBI or have the codes ready in case of this is really, really disturbing. The fact that they keep track of this sort of thing. You're just seeing this guy basically turn it around. Video number 3 has a similar thing. I think they actually attack a Liberty branded safe, although they block it out. You can show video 3 too. You don't need any sound on that either, Ryan. And it does take a little bit longer to do an attack. But what he's doing here, this is an angle grinder. He's just got a little cutting wheel, and he's going to do a sidewall attack on this safe. This is a Liberty branded safe. It's got the really nice looking lock. Again, very heavy and has a fireproof rating, which is sort of useless and nonsensical. You can see the brand for Secure It up in the corner there. But he's just doing this. You could do this with a hand tool. I've got DeWalt tools that will do this. This one takes probably 15 to 20 minutes to do. So once again, you're keeping honest people honest. But this is how you get into a safe if you need to. And if it takes 20 minutes to cut open, there's no real danger of somebody accessing it without the code if nobody's nearby. It's not like that gun's going to jump out and shoot anybody. George, you guys ever cut a safe?
Kyle, is it safe to do that with like ammo in there? Would those sparks ever set off a bullet?
No, not at all, because you'll see in a second, he's going to pull it open, and what you'll see is there's an entire layer of drywall. This guy's about to pull open a Liberty safe, which are thousands of dollars. Boom, he just pulls it open right there, and what you see is literally regular commercial drywall with the with the backer board there, and that interior board there is all just carpet and upholstery that makes it look pretty. It also is a carcinogen. It's also really bad for your guns, but that's neither here nor there. It can corrode older and antique firearms. But he literally just pried it open like that. And so the idea that they would comply in the same way and just hand over codes, it's scary to me that they actually keep a list of codes more than anything else. Have you ever seen videos like that, George?
No, I haven't. But the profit margin on those must be awesome because I don't see a lot of material or engineering going into that.
No, it's all in the doors. So I actually moved my safe when I was in Virginia down these basement stairs. I'll never do it again. And what I realized is I had a big stack on. It was like a 30 gun safe or something like that. The door itself probably weighed 200 pounds. It was a 2-man lift on its own. The rest of the residential container I could pick up with my 2 hands, and it was 80 or 90 pounds tops. It was gawky and weird. But the almost all the weight in those safes you'll find are in the doors, which is why if you ever open one of those safes up and they're not bolted to the ground, they will fall over on you. And so you'll see if you go into a store, and I'm just giving this as information for folks to have it. I think you guys should be aware of what it is you're spending your money on. And this is one of those products where, one, law enforcement apparently can get codes from Liberty, so that's scary. And I think that if you're in the market for a safe, that is not a good company to deal with. But moreover, if they need to get into it, they're going to get into it. Like just in the same way I had a search warrant that was served on my Airstream when I was in the Air Force. And they basically gave me the same option. You can give us the keys or we can cut off the door. And when you have a vintage 1971 31-foot land yacht and you don't want them cutting off the door, you give them the keys because they show you the warrant. And they go, we have access to the property. We'll get in one way or another. So you just go, yeah, please don't break my Airstream. I'd rather you just go in and search for whatever you need. That's how you do it.
Yeah, if you can afford it and you have the space, you're better off with a dedicated room in the basement with concrete walls and just buying a safe door for it.
There is a group that's called Secure It, like I said, that I have their lighter version because it's keeping honest people honest, keeps my kids out of it. But they offer what's called a true safe, and it actually has a layer of steel on the inside. Then it's surrounded by a layer of concrete, which you can cut, but you need a different bit. And then it has steel on the outside as well. They're heavy as hell. You have to have professional installation, but once you put it in, it's multiple levels and multiple bits, and the amount of time it would take to attack is very similar to what you said. A secured room that is steel and concrete reinforced. And that's how you do it if you're serious. Or you buy a Liberty and let the FBI get your code. Take your pick, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, look, either Liberty gives the FBI the code or else they're going to show up with an AT-4 or an RPG or some heavy explosives. I mean, choose your poison.
Choose your poison. Compliance with the government, folks. The idea is that we stay away from this thing. I want to do one video, and then we're going to talk about the Marxist lesbian, and then we'll shut this thing down. We can go a little long today, but I always like talking to George. And I could talk to George for like 30 minutes up front, and it would just go away into the ether as far as time goes. Let's watch this video. It's video number 8. Somebody sent me this, an ATF agent who's a friend of mine, retired. He's actually one of the good guys. Sent this to me. It's one of the funniest videos I've seen. We're going to talk a little bit about PSYOPs because I know you worked in the information space and you've worked. This is kind of, this is a lighthearted take on it, folks. There's a little bit of colorful language in there. So if you want to shield this from work or if you need to shield it from kids, be aware. But video number 8, it's about 2 minutes and it's some of the funniest 2 minutes of memes that Ryan and I have seen in a while. So a little bit of lighthearted stuff about PSYOPs.
It's the absolute best. Get ready.
Hello, I'm from the U.S. government. Does something feel wrong in the world, but you can't put your finger on it? Are you yearning to fight injustice and be part of something bigger? Do you do your own research? If so, you've been chosen to participate in our new PSYOP, QAnon. PSYOPs are usually carried out by our intelligence agencies in countries we've invaded or whose governments we've overthrown, in order to convince the local population that we're there to help them. QAnon is just like that, except the target isn't a foreign population. It's you. And the government we're planning to overthrow is... Follow the white rabbit. At the heart of this PSYOP is Q, a government insider who will give you advance warning about major events, like the arrest of Hillary and deep state leaders, which never happened, and the end of the Democratic Party in 2018, who actually went on to win the House that year. And if years of fake predictions start to get you down, don't worry. Trust the plan. The best part of this PSYOP is you'll believe you're in a PSYOP, except that's not the PSYOP you're actually in, but the PSYOP where we let you think you're in a PSYOP. PSYOPception. Q-proof. Joining QAnon is easy because at its core there are some truths. Like, the media really does lie to you. There really are powerful predators out there, and there really is a global pedophile ring that ritually abuses kids. But as you follow Q's droppings, you'll gradually LARP yourself deep into the rabbit's rectum, where you'll find others who yearn to fight injustice just like you. The 5G crew, the Plandemic crowd, the FEMA camps, and chemtrail folks too. All LARP together into a single LARP we can control. Where we LARP one, we LARP all. In exchange for all this entertainment and newfound sense of purpose, all we ask for in return is your help. No, you fucking idiots, not to arrest Hillary. Q has convinced patriots, even the guy who spent decades warning you about the police state and martial law, that martial law is now a good thing. What's that? When do we take down the deep state? Aw, honey. The guy who exposed the real deep state is being tortured by it right now. And where are you? Oh, that's right. Q told you to trust the plan and have a big circle jerk on Aiken. The Great Awakening. And that's the purpose of QAnon, to convince those who would normally be on the front line of fighting our shitfuckery to sit by and watch as we prosecute your truth tellers, purge your justice system, and rat fuck this election. QAnon. Nothing can stop what's coming, because you'll be sitting on your ass when it does.
There's some stuff in there that I don't agree with 100%, obviously, but just the idea of taking people out of the game, taking them off the board by getting them into these like weird rabbit holes. I think, plus the way that it's delivered is so good.
That's what the CIA does, and I've been used by the CIA more than once. But they will spin an op at this. Think of like an old school 33 RPM record. There will be an op at the center, but the difference with this record is that it spins in different directions, and they will spin an op within an op within an op. And to the point where they actually will send out emails to their entire workforce as part of that outer ring of that first part of an operation. So
because it gives your validation checks when people like kind of cursorily touch it or something.
Yeah, I mean it's so there's a long history of intelligence services doing this to nations. I mean, we saw the Green Revolution in the Czech Republic. Or without the Orange Revolution, I can't remember. It was the Green Revolution in Iran that failed. But no, we're getting played, and some of it is of our own doing. But some of it is legit.
This episode, if they haven't seen it yet, the idea of idolatry goes deep into this in a lot of ways for me. It's the idea that some person is coming to save you, and that person is not a salvific God. It's a Q. It's a Donald Trump. If you don't have access to everything that the United States government is doing, which is basically nobody, I don't think anybody has all that access. You're not going to uncover the secret plan on your own and then be able to brag about it on the internet. That's not a real thing. So whenever you go out there and actually Bad Religion, which was a punk rock band that I love, I absolutely love them. They seem like the most irreverent guys, and they almost always have really pointed social commentary. He said there's a song that they have called The Answer. And they said, if somebody comes to you and says, I have the answer, like that person is yet another fraud. And he goes through a whole list of people that have, quote unquote, the answer,
Yeah. No, this is why when I teach college, I stress critical and iterative thinking. That without that skill set, you're going to get played. You're going to get worked real easy.
It's so true. We had kind of a thought experiment. This is not saying that this is what's happening. This is saying what is possible about Patriot Front. You and I kind of were riffing on this the other day, and I'd love to share it with people because I know people have questions about how these things could be done and what's the plausibility of it. Maybe you could share that based on some of your experience on there, what this would look like, who would be running it if possible, or how it would be run. Because I really found that fascinating.
So having come from the intelligence community before the FBI, which is a LARPer, they consider themselves part of the intelligence community.
Yes.
But the Patriot Fund thing, if I were going to do it, this is how I would do it, which is I would bring a former, ideally SF, Ranger, SEAL, somebody who thinks very highly of themselves into HSI headquarters and up to the nicest conference room we had outside the executive suite. And I'd tell them they're being considered for a senior executive position. And their job is to recruit people, to have them dress up. I'd lay out some basic op plan, have them dress up, have them coordinate for them to show up at a certain area and time, march around, and then disappear. But that person then would in turn tell each one of those people, he would recruit from a pool of people who have already applied for various positions within either federal law enforcement or the intelligence community, and say, hey, you're being considered for a position. We're running an operation here in the United States. I can't tell you anything about it, but we're going to create what's called a bigot list. And if you're not on that list, it makes them feel very exclusive and very important. And at the end of the day, you can either terminate the operation by telling all these people that they didn't make the cut, or you can hire some of them into the organization to include the person you bring in to run it, and tell them this was a compartmentalized program. Anyone that's not on this bigot list, you're not authorized to discuss it with them. And oh, by the way, 90% of the people that were involved have been declined employment. It's a real easy thing to run, I know, because we've ran them, but not inside the United States.
But the capability to do that sort of operation, you're playing on a couple of basic human emotions: the exclusivity of it, people's want or need to be something kind of elite, people who don't have the capability of being within the structure, but they would love to, and so you exploit that. There's a lot of just basic human exploitation that goes on, and then you run it and you tell them how exclusive and elite it is, and you can never talk to anybody about it. They become unfalsifiable too for the people that believe in it too, because it's like they believe that it's legit, and you could never tell them otherwise because they heard it from a source that they trust, and they were quote unquote recruited. These things have been going on for a very long time, obviously in other places.
Yeah, no, and I used HSI in my example because they're unconstrained. They don't report to the DO.
Do we just lose George? There you go, folks. This is how it happens. George has got a bad connection there. I think that's the case.
It's the deep state.
That's the other possibility, right? We always like to go in there. I want to cut that piece out, Ryan, and I want to share it with people as just a standalone video too. And George may join us in here at the end. But the last thing I did want to pivot towards and talk about, if we can, is topic number 8, and we'll get George into weigh on that. George, I do appreciate that analysis. I think it's really, really relevant. And this could be a psyop. We're going to talk about the last little piece here and kind of wrap this sucker up. But this is probably just the way that the state of affairs in America right now. Our topic number 8 was coming from Catholic Vote. It's coming from The Loop this morning. And it's a discussion about how the American Library Association president is a self-proclaimed Marxist lesbian. Do you want to pop that sucker up there, Ryan? We can just look at the main piece. So there you go, folks. You can go and see it in Catholic Vote's news feed today. If you're not getting The Loop, this is what you're missing out on. And she was out there basically saying, in no uncertain terms, by the way, that she thought that they should be using these as recruiting grounds for socialists, that she has a Substack that she runs, which is called Actively Unwoke, and that she's trying to create the largest socialist conference in the country. She wanted to be a speaker initially, but then they just went out there, and she's been kind of quietly canceling these things off so that she can kind of get away with it. But they're out there pushing an agenda in the libraries of all places, which used to be a place where you would go and get things like, I don't know, literature and understand about America, where you could go learn about that myth of Edenic possibilities and the romantic writers of the early American country and figure out what this century was all about, what it meant to them. In the meantime, now they're taking this and they're weaponizing it because it's a place that was available. And it used to be that old ladies who probably had a Betsy Ross flag that they'd sewed themselves used to be the librarians, and now we have these like young, culturally Marxist lesbians that are out there trying to convert your kids into to hate this country, which is shocking. And like I said, psyop or otherwise, it's still scary stuff.
So we've seen the video of people being, videos plural, of people being escorted by armed uniformed police officers out of school board meetings for reading excerpts from books and that were outright pornographic that are being used in schools. And that's the only way to fight this, is for parents to, go to the children's section of the library to be aware of changes that are being made. The problem with being conservative and wanting to conserve American values is that we have jobs and responsibilities, and unfortunately, the left, all they want to do is tear everything down. So without eternal vigilance from people with some sort of religious background that believe in a higher power, that believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, without us actively looking at what these people are doing, to include this head of the Library Association and school boards, they're going to keep on getting away with it. And it just takes eternal vigilance, and they're not going to stop. Therefore, neither can we.
No, and the sad thing is, and I had a discussion with people about this the other day, it's part of it is the fact that we have jobs and we have things that we got to do with our day, and we have children, and we are actually in, being productive members of society. And the other half is that by being a conservative, your goal is always defensive. It is conserving the things that exist that are good. And so that is a defensive posture as opposed to the aggressive posture that the political leftists had. We call them progressive for a reason. Their movement is always forward. It doesn't even have to agree with itself. They have these irrational positions on many different bases, right? We can think about it. They think the government is bad and infringing on black people, but they also think that nobody should own a gun, which would be your primary method of resisting a government. And they also think that the climate should be respected and the government needs to be the one that does that. So they have all these illogical beliefs that sort of batter against each other, but they fight on all fronts in an always aggressive, forward-moving, progressive, attempting to gain ground. And conservatives are just fighting on all sides, trying to maintain the thing that's in the middle. And when you're defensive, you're always going to be on the back foot. You have to be.
Yeah, and we can never let up, because they're not going to let up. And when you ask these progressive, what are they progressing forward to, they can't answer that question.
Of course not.
It's just, we're progressing. So the process with a progressive is the goal, kind of like how they use the legal system. The process is the punishment. We actually have a goal, which is to preserve the founding principles of the country, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and to preserve American sovereignty. We actually have a goal. Their goal is just chaos. They really should call themselves what they are. They're anarchists. All they want to do is tear down.
And once they've torn it down, then they can progress towards a little bit of order that they can tear down again. It's just, a cycle of insanity, unfortunately. Yeah. And like I said, the ideas don't have to agree with each other. I think that neatly sews it up with our original basis on the unkempt and overgrown garden, which is to say that conservatives are attempting to maintain those boundaries. Be a person on the wall. You have to be a person on the wall. That means you're speaking freely, you're speaking your mind, you're defending your positions intelligently, and you're doing so without violence. And you're not buying a Liberty safe so that the FBI can easily get into your gun safe. That's one of the pieces. But we all have to maintain those boundaries. Otherwise, we do get a garden that's overgrown. And if you've ever seen the difference between a well-kept garden and a garden that has gone to pot and to seed, it's not very cool to walk through when there's stickers and brambles and weeds. It's a lot nicer to go through the manicured garden. Even leftists love a manicured garden. They just don't know what they're fighting against when they're out there trying to fight these barriers and boundaries. So we can only advocate that position, and everybody's got to take the spot on the wall.
Yeah, and when you weed that garden, there are lawn and leaf bags that have to get taken to the curb and thrown into the landfill.
That is a dark way to add to my metaphor, but I think you're exactly correct, George. Thank you for joining me this morning. Thanks for stepping on there. I'm sorry about our internet connection issues, whether it's deep state or just a failure to have solid infrastructure. Maybe some of that Build Back Better money is going to get your internet faster. What do you think?
It wasn't a Coast Guard helicopter, so
this is pretty low. it's pretty low on the interruption scale for us. Thanks for jumping in last minute with me to talk about this. I think that piece about Patriot Front or a seated operation like that will be very interesting to folks, and that's a value to be out there and have your experience. People can follow you at Senior Chief EXW, and your truth handle. What's your truth handle?
I think it's Jarhead George.
I think it is too, because I think I tagged you this morning.
Yeah, I try to mix it up. I mean, having lived 2 lives. Just real briefly, I had to get out of the Marine Corps because of a personal situation and tried to go back in after the world was at peace, and the only people that would give me a chance was the Navy. And so I took it, and I had great times at both organizations, although the darkness primarily comes from my Marine Corps service.
That's why we get along too, though. Folks, just a little bit of inside ball. When George and I were talking the other day, I said something like, my mother thinks I'm the angriest person she's ever met. And George said, give it 15 years and get back to me. He's like, you got a long ways to go. So I very much appreciate someone that thinks that they're angrier than I am. At least it puts me in perspective for the world. It also gives me a goal. Everybody should have a goal in life, right?
Amen.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much for joining me. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show. We stream live from Liberty Hill, Texas, every weekday at 0930, and that is 8:30 here in Texas, America. You can always find our lively discussion in the online chat, which was insane. I had it on slow chat mode for a while, and every time I looked over, there were 100 messages that I hadn't seen, 99 that I had to scroll through. So I missed everything that was going on in the live chat, all you wild animals. But thank you so much for being there. You can find the live chat at rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. You'll find our latest video. The live links are always up before the show. And like I said, 0830 here in Texas, America to do that. Thanks for all you who are live chatters. Thanks to Real is Rare as being a new monthly subscriber. You can subscribe. I think it's like $5. As far as I can tell, we get all $5 of that subscription. So that's really awesome. If you guys want to support the channel, you don't have to. You can go here for free. We're here for you, but we do appreciate if you do. And you can also leave us a 5-star review. Nearly 700 5-star reviews left on Apple. And here is one today, which is from Safe Again. Says, incredible information. I'm amazed that every time I listen, I learn information not available elsewhere. Also enjoyed your excellent interview with Jason. I think this was actually Jacob Chansley. And I had no idea about the details other than what Tucker revealed in the videos he released. So I'm pretty confident that was the Chansley interview, which I thought was also pretty interesting. I found out some new things. Folks, this show will continue to grow because of you and your support on places like Apple and Spotify, iHeartRadio, and we even stream live to Facebook. A couple of others. We're actually on Twitter as well, doing it live so you can catch us anywhere. Again, that live chat is at home on Rumble. And please share it if you do like the videos, if you like the content. We appreciate that, and it does help grow our subscriber base, which is always great for us. It gives us a bigger platform and a bigger microphone to share voices like George. You can follow Ryan Matta, who is the hardworking producer of The Kyle Seraphin Show, a great addition and has definitely made a big step up in capabilities. You can follow him at Ryan Matta Media. There he is with a salute, just getting hit in the head over and over again by the spinning Suspendables logo. You can find him at Ryan Matta Media on Twitter or at Ryan Matta, M-A-T-T-A on True Social. Folks, before you leave, make sure you like this video, and we do really appreciate it. One last little thing here. Let me plug my friends. Where is he at? I think I've got a little piece of the Suspendables merch. If you wanted to see this comes through our buddy Garrett O'Boyle. So this is just a free promo that we do for him because he's a great guy. And there it is, the Suspendables merch. You can find it at the-suspendables.com. The-suspendables.com. And he's getting ready to start shipping out some of that merch. You guys can order that stuff up, and you'll be supporting Garrett O'Boyle, a man who has put it on the line and is actually hanging out at his house right now to see if the FBI decides to continue to suspend him forever, which is what we expect. We'll see you guys again tomorrow, and we might have a very interesting interview. I'm supposed to be talking to all 5 of the gentlemen who were just sentenced in this weaponized DOJ. We're talking to them from prison on the phone tonight, so we'll hopefully get that together, and we'll probably be sharing that with you guys tomorrow. Until then, God bless, have a safe day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.